I got something I think you're going to find really interesting. This is a block review of my own personal training block for last month, the month of June-ish 2023. Now, originally I was going to post this in the RTS Training Lab, just like I do all my other block reviews. However, this one went really well, so I decided I would brag to a wider audience about it. Not really. It did go very well, so it does make it a helpful illustration, I think, but this is a review that I do for pretty much all of my training blocks. I post them in the RTS Training Lab, and hopefully it is educational and illustrative for all of our members. And there are lots of tools there to help them utilize the lessons learned. One of the things I really like about putting this up in the Training Lab is our Training Lab software allows us to build the program in the lab, which you'll see in the following video, and that is available to all of our lab members. They can then take that, modify it, and deploy it to themselves or any of their own athletes. Now, before we get to the meat of it, I just got to say real quick, Training Lab members enjoy a lot of benefits. Videos like this on the regular are one of those benefits, but really it comes with a full program library, of which there are many, many very different programs, lots of different strategies, and we're adding to it every month with our strategy of the month, which comes with its own program, again, that the members can modify or deploy for themselves or their athletes. All lab members get access to all of our past videos, including past block reviews. They get access to our software package, our coach's dashboard, all of our premium reporting, and probably one of my favorite things is our expert office hours. These are live calls set up by RTS coaches and other subject matter experts, to include experts on injury rehabilitation or nutrition or sports psychology. These are standing meetings that lab members can just jump into and learn from, ask questions, and ultimately improve their craft. So with all that out of the way, let's get into it. All right, welcome to the review of my last training block. This block is the one that I completed kind of at the beginning of July here. It was a block that the primary aim was to develop structural adaptations. I mean, of course, the aim is to improve at the competition lifts, but the means through which I wanted to do that was through structural adaptation. And as we get further into this, you'll see more what I'm talking about. So let's start by reviewing how things went for me. Squat and deadlift went really well. You can see estimated 1RM changes over the course of this block. Looked really, really good. Let's pop over to deadlift. Deadlift in particular looked amazing. As this block went, I was able to keep up my deadlift speeds, and estimated 1RMs looked great. When it comes to the bench, not awesome. It's also worth noting kind of the context here. So this is a second to last block prior to competing. It is a structure block, but you'll notice, especially for the bench, there are plenty of kind of metabolic block kinds of flavors, which is more typical of me in this kind of second to last position. This is a pretty typical kind of response for my bench in this second to last block. My bench tends to not like this kind of work a whole lot, and it tends to be pretty stagnant. However, I do notice that there is usually an improvement in the next block, and that's really the tell. In the beginning of your emerging strategies journey, you're just trying to find like one-to-one relationships. When I do this block, I get this kind of result, and that starts to form the basis through which you do your final block as you go into competition, your peaking strategy. And then as you go further out, you may notice certain blocks, like this kind of block for me, tends to potentiate subsequent blocks. So while I did see a bit of a regression here, it is mostly this one you notice it's mostly stagnant except for this one sort of dip. And then that dip is, it's not nothing, but it's not enormous either. It's less than 10 pounds in total. It's probably around 7 pounds, which my estimations are tight enough that I can see a real difference in performance to the tune of 7 pounds, but it's not enormous. So let's go a bit further into this. And I don't think there's a whole lot that I want to cover specifically when it comes to the block review itself, but you can just kind of see a smattering of what's going on. Just kind of note that when it comes to the exercises and the rep ranges, the warmer the dot, the more sets there were in that particular rep range. So here, close grip bench with mini bands and feet up. There's lots of different reps that were done, but mostly sets of 8. So that would be an important way that you would go about reading this chart. When it comes to stress indexes, let's check down to total stress. So something that's worth noting when it comes to the total stress for hip dominant movements, this is deadlift training, extremely low training stress. There was a bit more when it comes to knee dominant movements. Front squats are going to be listed under knee dominant movements, but if you've been following me for any length of time, you'll note that front squats do tend to transfer pretty well to my deadlift, and really squatting in general tends to transfer pretty well to my deadlift. So you can really kind of combine these two together, but even then, we know this, right? My work capacity for lower body training is quite low. Conversely, my work capacity for horizontal push is quite high. So something worth paying attention to maybe. I did skip out on rows quite a bit. You see kind of the vertical and horizontal pulling. There's just not a lot there. If something tends to get missed, it tends to be vertical and horizontal pulling. So let's get into the actual nuts and bolts of the training. So I'm going to pop over to the training builder, the program builder rather. This is a block that I've created. It's a global strategy now, so you can copy it, you can deploy it to your athletes, you can modify it. And I want to dig into this a little bit because there's a lot of nuances to how I built this block in particular. So first we'll open up this bench. This is the primary bench slot, and there's a lot of sets, but I've tried to list the protocols here. So you see it's a top single at 7.5 RPE, but then from there, there's a whole bunch of doubles at 85%. So default RPE chart's going to list that as a 6.5. I can tell you for me, it's less than that. With 85%, I can usually get 6 to 7 reps. I just tend to be a reppy bencher. It's also worth noting that when I was doing this protocol, I was using short rest intervals. So usually RPE minus 5. I would give it 1 minute minimum. So if the RPE was 5, then 5 minus 5 is 0. That doesn't make sense to do a 0 rest. So I would give it 1 minute minimum, but generally RPE minus 5. So as the RPE ticked up, I would get a little bit longer rest breaks. And that helped me to get through this work pretty quickly. But that's what I'm talking about when I say this block had a fairly metabolic flavor to it. Followed that up with close grip bench, or very close grip bench rather, with feet up. So just a quick definition for me, very close grip bench is going to be with your index fingers right around pec width. So that's going to vary depending on the lifter. So I'll put close grip as index fingers around shoulder width. Very close grip would be index fingers around pec width, and I really wouldn't want someone to go any closer than that. The protocol here is sets of 12, or excuse me, a top set of 12 at a 9 RPE, followed by a 5% load drop. And you would do as many sets as you need to get to the stress index target for whichever lifter you're programming for. So you would expand this or contract it so that you would get the protocol that you're after. The default chart is going to peg this as like a 5 RPE, but fatigue is going to accumulate, so it won't be a 5 RPE. It's going to be, a 7 RPE in the beginning, and then it's going to creep up from there. So you will accumulate fatigue a little bit faster than this might indicate. This straight RPE 5 calculation might indicate. Then I would finish this session up with chest supported rows. You can do any sort of chest supported row variety, if you've got seal rows or whatever you've got. I wanted to do this one pretty heavy, so top set of 6 at a 9 RPE, and used a rep drop to keep the intensity up. The next day I did my main squat workout. Top set was a single at 7 RPE, followed by 10 reps at 8 RPE. My squat really thrives on rep work, so it's not always the most fun to do, but what is fun is adding weight to your top singles. So yeah, that was the focus. Now, we talked about already that my work capacity for squats or for lower body in general, is quite low. So I have another movement listed here as low pin front squats, and I'll go through it with you in a second, but it's worth noting that for me, I usually did not get to this movement. I would usually engage all of the available stress in the competition squat, and there wasn't really anything left for the low pin front squat, so that would get nixed most of the time. The protocol that I have listed for it was just a benchmark set of 5 at 8 RPE, and then reducing to 75% or thereabout. The idea here is to do a cluster set of 5. So you do 5 reps, wait 30 seconds, and then do another 5 reps. And that second 5 reps should ideally be around an 8 RPE. The reason that I'm doing this is because doing one set of 10 at an 8 RPE for front squats is absolutely miserable. In fact, it's severely limited by my ability to breathe more than it is my ability to do anything else. So by using a cluster, that 30-second rest break in the middle means that first set of 5 is, it's 75% roughly of my 1RM. So that first set's quite easy. So then you would take a 30-second rest break, and it's still a lot in terms of being out of breath. Still very out of breath, but I'm not quite as limited in doing it this way as I would have been just trying to do, 10 reps blasted all the way through. However, it should be a bit more similar training effect than just doing straight low RPE rep work. So this is where the block really starts to take on a bit of a unique flavor. The Wednesday session for bench included some weight releaser work. This had gone quite well in a prior structure block that I ran. We already talked about my bench result from this block and how it was a bit different. I think a lot of that has to do with kind of the metabolic flavoring, but also is generally higher intensity. And I also noticed that I got more beat up in the pecs during this block than I have in previous blocks. With weight releasers even. We talk about how eccentric overloading causes more muscle damage and things of that nature. That has not been my experience thus far. Usually weight releaser work, I tend to handle it about like I would anything else. This block, however, I did seem to accumulate more, I guess I would say, inflammation during the course of the block as a result of the weight releaser work. So this was a close grip bench with weight releasers. It's worth noting I was using about 20% on the weight releaser. So you do get a slightly super maximal first rep eccentric when you're doing weights in this loading range. The protocol that I would do was a top set of 5 at a 9 RPE with a rep drop after that. So I would keep the weight, but just reduce the number of reps I was doing. That would be followed up by a close grip bench. Remember, that's about shoulder width grip with a mini band and feet up. So emphasis there being, additional volume on pressing muscles, slight bias toward triceps, but overall this is part of the structure work of it. Top set of 10 at a 9 RPE, followed by 9 at a is a load drop, so it's the same. I need to correct that. 7.4. Sorry. There. That's how that's supposed to read. So it's a load drop. So you keep the weight the same, or a rep drop, excuse me. It's a rep drop. So you keep the weight the same and you reduce the number of reps to cruise right around an 8 RPE. The Thursday session was focused on deadlifting. Now, I've been handling my deadlift training a little bit differently lately. The goal here was really a single at a 9 a single at around 90%. Now, I know that my top single, the single that puts me around 90% is 0.29 meters per second. It rates out to about a 6 RPE, but what does that mean in terms of, like, how are we defining this RPE is a lot less clear, because reps in reserve, at least for my deadlift, doesn't seem to amount to very much. I'm the kind of person who can do, at least 8 reps with 85%. So, I mean, do you really want to be training, 90% for sets of 5? No, I don't. I don't think that would be beneficial. That would not get me closer to where I want to be. So, in this case, I brought in velocity as my main governor and selected a velocity that put me around 90% of 1RM. So for me, that worked out to be around a 0.29. Feels around a 6 RPE. Stock standard RPE chart calls it a 7.5, but we know that everybody is a little bit different. So when it comes to governing my own training, I want to use the best data that's available, so I use my custom RPE charts as well. The back off work were sets of 5 at 80% with short rest intervals. Again, RPE minus 5. The first set of 5 was almost always like a 6 RPE. The second set of 5 was usually a 6 or 6.5 RPE. But yeah, so again, that just highlights the reppy nature of my deadlift. And that's kind of what I was looking for out of my deadlift training during this block. And again, the deadlift went fantastic. So no complaints from me there. Follow that up with some sort of row. I put in cable row here, but it really could be anything, whatever you've got available at the gym for a myo-rep series. 15 down to 4. Obviously, the RPE will go up with your 30-second rest intervals between those. So you'll accumulate more peripheral stress there than what is currently listed, by the book. For this Friday session, again, there's another weight releaser weight releaser workout. Same 20%-ish on the weight releasers. In this case, it was bench with a mini band for 6s. This one saw a top set of 6 at 9 RPE, followed by a 5% load drop, continuing on with sets of 6. This was good, and generally I feel good about the work that I did here. Yeah, not too much more to say about it. I had front squats in this workout, usually up to a top single at 7, followed by sets of 5 at around a 6 RPE, intentionally with short rest. So this first set of 5 is going to be 5 reps at a 6, but that's just kind of what lets me select the weight. After that, I'm going to keep the weight the same for any additional sets, however many additional sets. You know, in this case, I didn't usually have too much stress that I needed to use up here. Usually didn't have too much stress that I needed to use up on the front squat, but if you had more, then you would, continue to use the same weight, but just the shorter rest intervals. From there, I would do some dumbbell bench for a MyoRep series. If there were any additional lower body training stress that was needed, I could plug in split squats. This was especially helpful if I needed leg work that was not lower back work, or spinal erector work rather. The front squat tends to be quite taxing on back muscles, which makes it great for deadlift, but you do hit a limit for how much you need there. And if I would start approaching that limit, I would share some of that volume with the split squat. Same if I had any sort of lower back issue that was acting up. That didn't really happen in this block, but the whole reason for the split squat being there is kind of a relief valve. It's there, it's done in a MyoRep fashion, so you accumulate work quite quickly. I think I did it once or twice during the block. And then the final thing here was some lat pull downs, another MyoRep series. So, like I said, there's a fair bit of nuance to how the details of this block were constructed, but overall, I'm happy with the result. I feel like the squat and the deadlift benefited directly and significantly. I feel like the bench was a good setup block for what's coming up, this final block, and I know that bench tends to respond really well to what I've got planned in this block. So hopefully you guys find something useful here. This does tend to skew a little bit heavier than most structure blocks. Tends to be a little bit more focused on compound movements than a lot of structure blocks. Obviously, there's the utility of weight releasers that gets brought into play here. The metabolic flavor, especially for a lot of the bench work, is apparent. So I'm calling it a structure block, but you can probably see by now how it's blended from several different themes, and I think that's fine in this context, given that it's like a second to last training block. If I was further out and needed to preserve more direction, I think I would probably try to make it a little bit more of a pure structure block. But it's kind of like a blend between what I needed as a structure and a more traditional emerging strategies tier 2 block, where you're using your second level greatest hits. That really came through with the weight releasers, and again, I'm confident in where it's going to go from here. But if you guys have any questions, concerns, you want to know how to modify this or how to use it for yourself or your athletes, let me know. Be happy to have some discussion with you. Thanks for watching. See you later. Hey, thanks again for watching. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, subscribe, and also please consider joining the RTS Training Lab. I think it's a really underrated training service. If you're into training, if you're into coaching, then it's definitely something you should look into. There's going to be a link in the description that'll take you to where you can go to learn everything you need to know about it. including getting signed up. Thanks again for watching. See you next time.